I'm Rocky Young. I'm the owner of Boondocker Performance in Idaho Falls. We've been here for 10 years. I've been snowmobiling for 20 years or so. I started messing with snowmobiles years ago. I'm by trade an automobile mechanic. And so I work on cars. I used to work on cars, and on my spare time I would tinker with my snowmobile. And early on I felt like, what could I get without spending a lot of money? And so I would make modifications that were just cheap and simple. In terms of dollars, it's not the first thing to do, spend money to make a snowmobile better or to make a snowmobile lighter. Spending money isn't the first place to start. For example, when the Polaris 800 first came out, the very first year it came out, I took the snowmobile home, I put it in my garage, and I took it apart. And I took it clear apart. And then I let it sit there, and I would sit out in my garage and stare at it and think about it, and then the snow came, and my snowmobile was in pieces, and so I wanted to go ride it. So I threw it back together real quick with the parts I felt like I needed, and I had a pretty good pile of parts left over that I didn't really need, and I left them in the garage that winter, and that was probably the best way to lighten a sled back then. Weight reduction on a snowmobile is probably the top of the list of things that will enhance your riding experience, in my opinion, that work the best for me. Any weight savings is significant if you do it in a variety of places. Horsepower is always a good place to get through the snow better, to overcome obstacles, to climb or jump or power through a drift or whatever it is. Horsepower is always there on tap. It's cool to have. It's a lot of fun to use. The relationship between weight and horsepower is really an interesting deal, because when you have horsepower, the snowmobile will feel heavier, and it will be harder to hold on to, and it will be more tiring to ride. Whereas if you take weight off of the snowmobile, you feel more comfortable. The lighter it gets, the more comfortable you're going to feel. Once you're down to the weight that you can be at and still have a very dependable sled, then you're where you should be. Should never compromise dependability to lose weight, and it happens all the time. Suspension is a big part of making a snowmobile light. Okay, you have to do the suspension for the weight of the rider and the weight of the sled. Everything that you're going to start with was set up for a heavier vehicle. And if you're just losing, 10 pounds or 15 pounds, maybe you're not going to notice it so much. The snowmobile I rode last winter, I'd taken 50 pounds off of it, approximately, and it was already a very light sled, and so my suspension needed some serious attention, because I was floating and bouncing and not sticking. When you go out and you buy a new snowmobile and you immediately are thinking, well, where can this thing be a little bit lighter? The obvious first answer is in the muffler, or the can, or the silencer, or whatever you want to call it. There's great weight savings there, almost always. So especially in Arctic Cat and Skidoo, Polaris did a pretty good job with their muffler, and it's hard to decide whether you want a louder sled or whether you want a little bit lighter sled, because that's a pretty good muffler. And Some guys might just like to run it. There's no one good spot to lose a bunch of weight. There just isn't. If you want to go extreme, you've got to lose weight everywhere that you possibly can. You want to have a snowmobile that's going to be pretty much stock, very dependable, but a little bit lighter. Then there's lightweight parts that are available. In every case, a lighter hood, headlights. The hood headlight combination is pretty heavy. The headlights themselves don't weigh that much. The hood doesn't weigh that much. But when they get the assembly all together, it starts to add up. And so there's some really nice little headlights nowadays. Most of us don't ride at night. We just need lights to get out of the mountains. And so a headlight is a good place to lose it, but the headlight in itself won't do you much good. You really need to do a whole hood headlight combination. Rotating weight is a really important place to lose weight. One of the things that happens is you'll accelerate faster, or you will you'll make speed quicker, or your RPMs will come up quicker. That always feels like it's lighter. Accelerating harder or with more torque makes it feel heavier, but if it's snappy, then it's going to be feeling like this sled is lighter. And I think I go back to feeling like the sled is lighter because I don't know how much it really matters how much the weight of the vehicle is. I think what's more important is, what does the weight feel like? How does it feel like when you're riding it? And the new sleds are they're all very good snowmobiles. All the brands are way beyond what we've had in years past. But for example, the Skidoo's quite a bit heavier than, say, the Polaris. Yet effort to ride it is maybe less. If you're just winding through the trees, and the Skidoo is a heavier sled that is easier to bring up onto one ski. And so I guess with weight, then there's also the consideration of balance, and how is the sled balanced. In terms of dollars and how much money am I going to spend per pound, it starts out, the first few pounds are cheap, maybe even free. An example of that would be the seat. You can take the seat over to your upholstery shop, and they can put a closed cell foam in the parts of the seat that you don't sit on, and you can lose a couple pounds, maybe more. Even in a light seat, even in a small seat that comes from the factory. And that's not going to be real expensive as long as you know the guy at the upholstery shop. You'll do pretty good. There's other places to lose weight just by taking parts that you just don't feel like you're using all the time. Headlights is a good place to lose weight, but you seem to need to replace them with something, so you spend a little bit of money on a headlight cover or something like that. Body panels is a common place for people to start losing weight. It starts to get more expensive when you start going further. The more expensive places to lose weight is in the suspension, and there is weight savings to be had there in some cases. And then as you go more and more expensive, you can start to buy carbon fiber parts. I think that the rear suspension is in some sleds is a good place to lose weight, and it's always pretty expensive to lose weight there. And you can increase the performance of the suspension as well. So I like that spot. The snowmobile I built last year, we had a suspension shop make some special parts for us out of some exotic materials, and it turned out to be very light and a very good suspension. I lightweighted a sled last year. I started with a 2013 Polaris with a 155 track, and I took the sled completely apart. Every bolt was replaced with titanium. That is the most expensive bang for your buck right there, is titanium bolts. I think that I lost pretty close to 6 pounds just in bolts. And it might be a bit of a fish story, because anytime you start talking about weight, the weights get a little bit more than they really are. But I'm sure that I lost over 5 pounds just in replacing bolts. And I think that cost me a little over $2,000 just for titanium bolts. So do the math. I think that snowmobile weighed, what was it, about 417 pounds from the factory. I weighed the snowmobile when I got it. I think mine weighed about 430 pounds, because it had a little bit of gas in it, a little bit of oil in it, had some shock oil and some brake fluid, and that stuff kind of adds up. And so, and I have estimated the weight savings on that sled to have gone under 380. So I saved over 50 pounds, and it could be just a little bit lighter than that, but not very much. I think it probably makes a difference if you lose weight. You know, for instance, on one side you lose a lot of weight. Maybe you've got a heavy muffler and you eliminate the muffler. You've just eliminated, 10 or 12 or 15 pounds off of that side of the sled. I think that the sled you can start to feel the balance of it. But I think at the end of the day, you just lose weight everywhere you can. I make turbo systems for snowmobiles, and when we build the turbo system, we consider the balance of the vehicle. But we can do that because we're starting from scratch and we're developing something. But when you're working with something that's already a product, all you can really do is make it lighter, and it will go somewhat out of balance. Typically, the right side of the sled will lose more weight than the left side will, and they're not that well balanced to begin with. You would expect that they would be balanced better than that, and I suppose some of them are, but there's sleds that aren't balanced so well as also.